Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Ingrain Workshop. A couple weeks ago I completed my miter saw station build. Now I always intended to do some upgrades, so in this week's video we're going to be upgrading the miter saw station and adding the wall cabinets that you see behind me. That's coming up next here at the Ingrain Workshop. Breaking down your plywood accurately is crucial for ensuring your cabinet pieces fit together perfectly and square. That's why I try to make all my cuts here at the table saw without adjusting my fence, so all the pieces are the exact same size. I'm going to be using 3/4 inch Radetia pine plywood for the cabinet sides, tops, and bottoms. Since I want my wall cabinets 12 inches deep and my doors are going to be 3/4 of an inch deep, I'm going to rip the sides at 11 1/4 inches. With the depth of the cabinet pieces now cut out, I'm going to now cut out the lengths. The lengths of the wall cabinets are going to be 30 inches long, for the exception of the cabinet that's going to sit directly over the miter saw station, and the length of that cabinet is going to be 15 inches, similarly to a cabinet, say, over a refrigerator. And again, consistency is the name of the game here, so this is why I'm still making all these cuts here at the table saw. I've got my fence set up at 30 inches. That way all these pieces will be consistent. They should all be 11 1/4 inches deep by 30 inches long. With my fence moved to 15 inches, I'll make the cuts here for the cabinets directly over the miter saw. I'm going to use a 5/16 inch setup block to set up the height of my table saw blade, because we're going to need to cut rabbets on the back of the sides of both the 15 inch cabinets and the 30 inch long cabinets. So starting out with just the 15 inch, I'm going to run some passes through here and just keep bumping the fence out until I get it out to 1/2 inch. And you'll notice here that I've started with a sacrificial fence with the blade right up against the sacrificial fence, and then I slowly just bumped it out 1/8 inch after every pass till I got to 1/2 inch. And then once I got to that point, then I'm going to take and run all the pieces through, and then just keep bumping the fence back in until I get to the sacrificial fence, and then I'll have my 1/2 inch rabbet cut on both my 15 inch cabinet and 30 inch long cabinets. With the rabbets cut on the sides of the cabinets, I'm now going to cut out the tops and bottoms. So here at the table saw, just like before, I'm going to start cutting out the tops and bottoms. So for my 30 inch wide cabinets, I'm going to be cutting those at 28 1/2 inches. That's going to be basically 30 inches less 3/4 inch for each side. Then for my 15 inch cabinets, I'm going to cut those down to 13 1/2 inches. And again, you're just deducting out 3/4 inch for each side of the cabinet. Next, I'm going to be taking my 15 and 30 inch tops and bottoms and basically cutting 1/2 inch off the depth of the cabinets. This way our rabbets will line up, and you can see the patented thumb kick here at the table saw. That's definitely not something that they teach at woodworking school. But this will allow both the tops and bottoms to sit flush with the rabbet, so when we do put in the back piece, everything will sit flush on the back of the cabinet. So with all the pieces, both the sides, tops, and bottoms all cut out now, we're going to have to hook them together. So the way I'm going to hook the sides and the top and bottom is with pocket hole screws. So I'm going to be taking the tops and the bottoms and just drilling pocket hole screws in, and that's how we'll fasten those to the sides of the cabinets. And keep in mind, these pocket holes will not be visible from the top or the bottom of the cabinets. Next, I'm going to drill my shelf pin holes in the sides of the cabinet. So I've made just a little positive jig here. I believe it's 8 inches long, and it's just so I can take and abut this Craig jig up next to it, and then I know I'm 8 inches off the bottom of the cabinet. And then the Craig jig has a fence on one side of it, which you hold tight to the edge of your side, and then you can go ahead and drill the first hole out and then set your mounting pin inside that hole, which will hold the Craig jig in place while you go ahead and screw out the other holes. And then you can take and adjust the jig up and screw in another 5 holes. So I'm going to do this twice. So I'm going to put in a total of, I think, 10 or 11 holes here. These holes are 1/4 inch in diameter and 5 millimeter for my European friends. And I'm going to repeat the process on the back side of the cabinet. But you do need to, make a note of the bottom of the cabinet. That way your holes will be aligned. Because I don't think I had 8 inches of no hole space at the top and bottom. So just make a note of the bottom of the cabinet. That way you're referencing off the bottom of the cabinet with your little 8-inch jig. That way all your holes will line up accordingly. I highly recommend this Craig shelf pin jig, and I'll leave a link in the video description below to where you can pick one up. They're pretty cheap and they come in handy. And it's well worth the money spent on it. Now it's time to assemble all the cabinets. So I'm going to start out with a 30-inch wide cabinet, and taking the bottom and the 2 sides, I'm just going to clamp them together. And you can see here where I'm just trying to line up the bottom with the bottom of the sides, and then also making sure that the bottom sits flat with the rabbet. And you'll notice that the rabbet on the sides of the cabinet are up. And then once I get the bottom locked in place, I'll just shoot some pocket hole screws into the bottom of the cabinet to secure them to the sides. So I'm putting a total of 6 pocket hole screws in the top of the cabinet, and then another 6 on the bottom of the cabinet. And that's sufficient enough to hold the cabinet together. And then what we're going to do is when we add the backing to the cabinet, that will be glued and screwed on. And once you do the backing, that'll give you the lateral support that you need to really secure the cabinet. So once I go ahead and get all the pocket hole screws screwed in, I'll go ahead and remove the clamps and then rotate the cabinet, and then I'll put the top on the cabinet. And I know you're probably looking at it thinking, well, the pocket holes, at least on the bottom, are going to be exposed. And granted, they are. The ones here on the top, of course, are the top of the cabinet, so you're probably not going to see that. But the ones on the bottom, since they're going in the miter saw station, I'm going to be having storage in the middle between the wall cabinet and the base cabinet. So these pocket holes that are on the bottom of the cabinet will not be seen. If these were just strictly wall cabinets by themselves, then I probably would have put the pocket holes on the inside of the cabinets. That way you wouldn't see them from the outside. Of course, you would see them when you open up the cabinets, but again, these are just shop cabinets. So again, I'm just going to repeat the process for installing the top of the cabinet. And then once I get everything flush, lock them in here with the clamps, and then go ahead and shoot my pocket hole screws in. And then once I get the pocket hole screws in, I will go back and double check the cabinet just to make sure it's square. It's not that important that it's perfectly square, because we'll definitely square it up when we put the back on the cabinet. And that's what's going to, give the cabinet the lateral stability that it needs. Next, I'm going to start ripping down the 1/2-inch plywood for the back of the cabinets. And you want to make them about an 1/8 inch shorter than the height and the width, just to make sure that it fits in there and it's not too tight or oversized. You want some play, that way you can really square up the cabinet and then glue and screw the back to the sides and the top and bottom and really lock in the cabinet. So again, I'm going to cut these out just like I did the the sides of the cabinets and the top and bottoms here at the table saw. That way I can ensure everything is cut identical for the 3 30-inch wide cabinets, and then the 2 15-inch wide cabinets, and then the 1 30-inch wide by 15-inch high cabinet that's going to sit over the miter saw. So starting here with one of my 15-inch wide cabinets, I'm going to use these square clamps and then just clamp these square corner clamps on the inside corners on the front of the cabinet. That way I can make sure that I've got the cabinet completely square. And then once I get these clamped on, I'll flip it over so the back is facing up and apply a bead of glue all the way around the back of the cabinet. Then I can sit the 1/2-inch plywood back inside the rabbets. I know that the cabinet is square, so once I get the back on, I can pre-drill for some screw holes and then go ahead and screw the back to the cabinet. And this really gives it the lateral support that the cabinet needs, and it's not racking or going to do anything. I'm also pre-drilling and countersinking here, and then I'm just going to use some 1¼ inch screws. I believe these are just 1¼ inch GRK screws, and go ahead and screw the back to the cabinet. And then I'll repeat the process for all the other cabinets. So now with the cabinet carcasses assembled, I can start installing them on a wall. And you'll see here, I've made a little platform that sits on top of the base cabinets, and I've made it about 18 inches tall. And this is what I'm sitting the wall cabinets on. Again, when you're doing something by yourself, you kind of have to be creative. I could have screwed a ledger board to the wall, but I didn't want any screw holes in my T111 siding. Plus, I'm going to be using this as a middle storage for the miter saw station for an upcoming video. So I thought it was a good time to go ahead and build it, and then I can utilize that to support the wall cabinets while I fasten those to the wall. Now, my walls are comprised, this is a metal building, but I also have wood studs. So the walls are comprised of a combination of both metal studs and wood studs. So I'm going to use both, wood screws and self-tapping metal screws to fasten these cabinets to the wall. But the first thing I'm going to do is align the cabinets together using quick grip clamps. Clamp the two cabinets together and then screw them together with 1¼ inch GRK screws. And then once I get the two cabinets, this is a 15-inch and a 30-inch cabinet. Once I get those screwed together, then I'll take and screw those to the wall and permanently affix them to the wall, and then repeat the process for all the other cabinets. And as you can see here, I've got my level on it, but I really don't need to because I've leveled the base cabinets. So these are basically just sitting on top of the base cabinet. So getting them level shouldn't be a problem. They should already be level. And once I get the wall cabinets fastened to the wall, at that point, then I'll take and start removing the middle storage. Again, I would just put this up there just to give me an idea of, what space I would have for different types of storage. And once I pull out the support, you can see there that they're, now fastened to the wall. And, you could just stop at this point, but I think utilizing that space between the wall cabinet and the base cabinet is worth utilizing to give yourself some extra storage here at your miter saw station. The next thing I'm going to do is install the shorter 15-inch cabinet, which goes directly over the miter saw. And again, having to come up with a creative way to do this by myself, I'm taking just some scrap plywood, screwing it to the top of the cabinet because you're not going to see the top of the cabinet. And then I'll use this scrap plywood as a positive stop to basically support the 15-inch cabinet so I can take and fasten it to the wall, and it will just be supported by the two cabinets on the left and right side of the miter saw. I did have to make a modification to the left cabinet here to accommodate some 3/4 inch surface mounted conduit, but other than that, all the other cabinets were installed on the wall with no modifications, and they look really, really good. So the next thing we're going to do is start building the cabinet doors. So it's back over to the table saw where we need to cut out the rails and stiles for the doors. I'm using some 1x12 Radidia pine, and I'm just going to cut them down into 2-inch widths, and that's going to be the width of my stiles and rails for the doors. With the widths cut over at the table saw, it's now time to cut the lengths of the rails and stiles here at the miter saw. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting the stiles for the 30-inch long cabinets at 29 3/4. I'm basically subtracting an 1/8 inch from the top and the bottom, so there's a reveal for these overlaid doors. And the rails will be 10 3/4 inches. And then on the smaller cabinets above the miter saw, I'm going to cut those stiles at 14 3/4, and the rails will be the same 10 3/4 inches. With all the rails and stiles now cut out, I'm going to come over here to my pocket hole jig workstation, and I'm going to shoot 2 pocket holes on both ends of all the rails. Now I'm going to assemble the stiles and rails. So since I didn't screw any pocket holes in the stiles, I'm just going to look at them and pick the best face and put that on the outside of the door. And then I'm going to take my rails and just put a little glue on the end grain of the rails, and then using a face clamp, just clamp the rail and the stile to my outfeed table here. And then pop some pocket hole screws in there, and then I'll just repeat that process all the way around the door until the door is completely assembled. And then once I get it assembled, I'll check it for squareness just to make sure it's square, and then I'll just repeat the process for all the other door frames. With all the door frames assembled now, I'm just going to take the random orbital sander and go around and sand the face of the door, the stiles and rails. I'm going to sand both the outside face and the inside face. And then I'm just going to take some sandpaper and just knock down the sharp edges all the way around the door just to soften up the edges. Now the door frames are ready to be stained, so I'm just going to give them a coat of stain just on the face and the sides. I'm not going to bother with staining the back of the door since it's not going to be visible, and this is my workshop. But the stain that I'm using, I believe, is a Valspar stain. It's a mixture, I think a 50-50 ratio of Special Walnut and Early American, which is the same stain that I've been using throughout my workshop for all the trim. The door hinges that I'm going to be using are Liberty door hinges for a full overlaid door. You can see here the trim is 2 inches, and I'm just going to center the template so that the center of the hinge will be at 2 inches. And then I'm just going to use a punch to punch out the location of the screw holes, and then also the hole for the actual hinge to recess into the door frame. And I'm going to do this for both ends of the door. Now these are just regular European style hinges. The supervisor would not allow me to put soft close hinges on my workshop doors. So, but once I get the holes punched out, I'm going to use a 1/16 inch drill bit to drill out the screw holes. Now over at the drill press, I'm going to use a 35mm Forstner bit to drill out the actual hinge recess, and I've went ahead and set up my drill press so it's at the correct depth. You definitely don't want to over drill for this particular hole for your hinges. I'm just going to use a framing square here just to align the hinges with the frame, and then go ahead and screw the screws in by hand. I'm screwing into a soft pine, so I just thought it'd be safer to screw these in by hand versus using a drill. I'm going to install the rusted corrugated panels inside the door frames. And I did a short a couple of weeks ago, and it's in my short playlist on how you can rust corrugated metal and the special potion that I use. So I didn't want to show it again here because it's the same way that I did my base cabinets for the miter saw. But I just want to make sure that the panel is about, an inch on every side undersized. And then I'm just going to mark the location of the hinges and cut out approximately 1/2 inch so the panel will slide past the actual hinges and allow me more room to screw the panel to the actual door frame. And I'm going to use some 3/8 inch screws here, just 3/8 inch wood screws, because I definitely don't want it to screw through the frame of the door. And I think I'm going to use a total of 4, just 2 on each side should be sufficient to hold the corrugated metal inside the door frame. So using this hardware positioning jig that I picked up off of Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the video description below, I'm going to use this to mark out the whole location for my DIY handles. Again, I'm not buying any handles for these doors. I'm just going to make them out of wood. But I am going to use this positioning jig just to position the handles on the face of the doors. That way I'll be consistent on all doors. And then once I punch out the whole locations, again, you just use the jig and hold it tight against the bottom and the edge of the door. Then you can make out your punch locations and then screw them out with an 1/8 inch drill bit. To install the doors, I'm just going to use a scrap piece of plywood and a quick grip clamp, and just clamp the plywood to the bottom of the cabinet. And then I've got an 1/8 inch shim, 2 1/8 inch shims that I'm going to place on top of the scrap plywood, and then vertically along the face of the cabinet. And this is going to give me the 1/8 inch reveal I need for the door. And then once I get the door in place, I'll use a punch to punch out the hole locations for the hinges on the inside of the cabinet. And then once I've got those punched out, I'll use a 1/16 inch drill bit just to drill some pilot holes, and then I'll reinstall the door and screw the hinges through these pilot holes. At this point, you don't have to worry about getting everything lined up exactly, because these European hinges have adjustments that will allow you to adjust the door left and right and up and down and also in and out. So you do have 3 separate adjustments that you can do for the door after you install the hinges. Now I'm going to cut out my door handles. So I've set my table saw to a 15-degree bevel, and I'm just going to take and cut a bevel on a 3/4 inch piece of the Radidia pine that I used for the doors and stiles. And I'll have a bevel on both ends, and that'll give me enough grip to use as a door handle. And I use these same handles on the base cabinets at the miter saw station. With the bevels cut on the door handles, I'm going to jump over here to the miter saw and cut the door handles down to a 5-inch length. So to install the door handles, I'm going to measure up 1 inch from the bottom of the cabinet. And I've taken my pocket hole screws and I've already put them through the pre-drilled holes in the door frame. So now I'm taking my handle and just positioning it 1 inch from the bottom and in the center. And then I'm just going to use the indentation from the pocket hole screws, so I'll know exactly where to pre-drill the holes in the actual door handles themselves. And that'll just keep them from cracking because of the soft pine that I'm using. With the 1/16 inch pilot holes drilled into the handles, I can now install the handles and just use the pocket hole screws to screw through the style of the door frame and install the handle into the door. Now I'm going to install my shelf pins. Now I picked these up at Amazon. They're specifically for 3/4 inch material, and I'll leave a link in the video description below to where you can get these. And it actually locks the actual shelf in so they can't be pushed up without depressing that clip there at the top of the shelf pin. And I'm going to go ahead and just use these to install the shelves within the cabinets. So I cut my shelves about 3/16 of an inch less than the actual width of the cabinet, so it would fit in to the shelf pins. And as far as the depth of the shelf, I cut it 3/4 of an inch shorter, which would allow for the door to shut and not interfere with the corrugated metal panel. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope this video helps you out in how to build wall cabinets. Now, keep in mind, these aren't kitchen wall cabinets. If I was building kitchen wall cabinets, I probably would add some face frames, some raised panel doors. But for workshop cabinets, these are cheap and fast, and that's really the way to go for your workshop. So I hope this gives you some ideas on how to do wall cabinets in your workshop. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you hit that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you click on that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support you're giving this channel. Now I'll leave links in the video description below to all the tools and equipment that I use for this build. Until next time, I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Have a wonderful day and God bless.